Hello, everybody. Welcome back to One Leeds. We're back in with another World Cup Leeds video. Myself and Gabe are here to talk through the week's activity when it comes to Leeds United and our World Cup proceedings. So it's been an eventful week. Me and Gabe have been chatting throughout the week. Obviously, England, I was about to say Leeds, and England playing the US in. I didn't expect it. I'm not going to lie. We should have probably done predictions, but you convinced me earlier on in the day, Gabe, that England were gonna really smash the States. It didn't happen. Obviously, it was a terrible game from England's perspective. US with a miles better team. I think every Englishman would admit that. But we're here to dissect as well the Denmark performance as well. Obviously, Rasmus was played a full 90, I believe, the other day, and yeah, Dan James, we can touch on him, I guess. But yeah, let's get into it anyway, mate. The big one that everyone will probably want us to touch on, the game between England and the States. I guess, like we were just talking about off air, mate, the predictions for the game, you predicted 4-1 England. I actually said it as well in the pub beforehand. I said I think we could knock a few past them here. And it's interesting, we were just discussing off air, if England maybe have scored within the first 5-10 minutes, it could have been a different result. But overall, mate, we'll discuss the man of the match very soon. But States very unlucky not to get the victory, I think.
Yeah, I think that when we talked in the last video, I said 80% of me says that England's gonna boss it, and there was 20%, the gambler in me, I think I said, thought that the States might hit him in the mouth. And I think if the States had a good number 9, they probably would have. I think when we make predictions of England, we sort of take for granted that, like any World Cup side, they would come in respecting the opponent, playing a positive match, and try to seize the moment as a team. That's not what England did. I think that Southgate respected the United States and played a very conservative setup, but I think the England players seemed to look, as the match went on, in the beginning quite confident. The further the match went on, the more chances America had. It did seem like the English players were like, uh-oh. And at that point, momentum had clearly swung against them. So yeah, it was a bit of a surprise result. It's a World Cup, right? Like, I think that what some people fail to realize is that we're not playing Football Manager where we just line up good players and hit a simulate button and get a result. Like, you have to actually go out and play these matches. It unfolded a little bit unexpectedly in some areas of the park. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah. Good result for the USA. I still stand by my prediction that they go out in 3, mainly because, again, they don't have a sharp number 9. They're going to be playing against a low block team that only needs to draw. The United States need to win in order to advance. And I'm sort of 50-50 as to whether they will or not. But what do I know? I predicted a 4-1 victory for England, and I was wrong about that. So I'll be happy to be wrong again, because I do, of course, want the States to advance, as I am an American. So
I think that, I don't know, as you just said, as soon as the game went on, I mean, we always talk about mentality as well when it comes to, when we speak about it a lot when it comes to Leeds, we speak about it a lot when it comes to England. The English have always had a problem when it comes to really grinding things out at certain stages of competitions. And for me, during that game, like you've just said, at the start, there was a real confident complex to this England side. And then as soon as, Pulisic hit the bar, as soon as McKennie started getting a bit of space.
What a strike that was. I know it didn't go in, but that came from nothing, didn't it?
Yeah, brilliant strike. Musa as well. Again, another outstanding performance. And then obviously Adams, who was just dictating the game. And it just, I don't know, mate. It just gets to a point where, like, you do look at the States and it doesn't matter really, regardless of ability. I almost find every time the States are in any sort of competition, it's just the will to win. I don't know if you can discuss that from a United States standpoint, but it seems like something that the English have always really struggled with in terms of fragility.
It's hard for me to tell with the English what comes first, like the chicken or the egg. Like, is the expectation what comes first? And then if they're not meeting those expectations, then the fear sets in. I'm not really sure what it is with the English. They don't seem to be a side, and haven't, that can play through adversity, right? If you make the team suffer, I mean, I don't know how many quotes are out there about football being suffering. We just need to suffer. I think some of the biggest teams in the world, regardless of the quality of football they play, know that there are going to be some matches where you just have to get stuck in and struggle against maybe on paper an inferior opponent, but nobody has ever won a major tournament on paper. You have to go out and win the match. And I also think that, and sure, if this was, again, a game of Football Manager, you would look at these lineups, look at where the players play, the depth of the side, and you would say that England should win the match. That said, there wasn't a lot of talk about how good some of these American players are. Like you mentioned, Yunus Musa is a really good player, 19 years old, playing at Valencia. That's not a bad club. That's not a poor standard of football.
I don't think he'll be playing at Valencia for much longer, Gabe.
No, probably not. Probably not. And there's a lot of questions at Valencia over whether he's being utilized properly as well. So that's another thing there. That being said, though, if you had told me, I certainly have my opinions about the valuation of some English players, but even though I'll probably go on this 3 or 4 times today, you can never convince me that Jack Grealish, Declan Rice are 100 million pound players. I just no. That being said, they're still very good players, right? And if you had told me, right, so the midfield of Weston McKennie, Juventus, good player. I don't think he's a great player. I think he's a good player, very good player, and very hot and cold, as we saw against Wales and then against England. But a midfield of Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa. I'm going to asterisk Tyler Adams because I think Tyler Adams is showing us that he's more than what anybody thought he was.
Captain fantastic.
Yeah. If you had told me they were going to pocket the midfield of Mason Mount, Jude Bellingham had a pass completion percentage of 70%, Mason Mount 49.
Yeah.
Tyler Adams won 72% of his duels in the midfield. Tyler Adams pocketed those guys. If you had told me that, and if you just look at the valuation on paper, the U.S. midfield combined is worth 62 million pounds. The England midfield, if you believe the transfer rumors right now, over 320 million.
Mm-hmm.
How much did Leeds buy Tyler Adams for?
17
million euros?
20, I think, altogether. 2023. Yeah, altogether.
Right. 2023. You're telling me Declan Rice is worth 5 Tyler Adamses? No chance. No chance.
I don't think so. Yeah.
So it was unexpected in that way, Connor. I was surprised that it wasn't in my bingo card that the U.S. midfield was going to dominate England's midfield. And they did. I mean, you look at the possession stats, 55% to England, 45% of the States. When you look at where the possession time was spent, the States pinned England back in their own half quite a bit.
Gabe, do you think it was a missed opportunity then?
For the States, yeah, absolutely. I think that Berhalter's come up. So there's more criticism happening with Greg Berhalter now than there was before. So the rumors come out. He said that he didn't play Gio Reyna against Wales because he picked up a knock. Gio Reyna said, I did not pick up a knock. This isn't true. Privately, this is allegedly, but a number of ex-players have come out and corroborated this. Berhalter asked Gio to go along with the story, and Gio wouldn't. And now there's some sort of discord in the camp. Anyway, you could also see Berhalter at the end when the States had a free kick, telling them just to play it in the corner and take the draw. So, yeah, I mean, as Americans, we don't like that, right? Maybe it's the smart decision, playing for a draw and then putting all your eggs in one basket to beat Iran, which I think is risky. But to be fair, I mean, yeah, it was a missed opportunity, but with the exception of Pulisic, which again came from nothing, and then McKennie skied a chance that I really thought he should have put on target.
Yeah.
For me, and you don't know though, if McKennie scores, it's like in the 25th minute or something like that. Yeah. Would England have changed the way they played quite a bit? Who knows? I still think it was a missed opportunity, but the States, even though they were threatening, even though the possession in dangerous areas, I think tilted more to them. They didn't really look like they were a real threat to score. No. We've scored 1 goal in the tournament so far. We clearly lack a number 9 who can bag goals for us. So yeah, missed opportunity, but you have to be happy with the result if you're the United States.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was really surprised. I mean, you were messaging me, and I was messaging you back and forth and stuff. I just couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't believe. Well, I can't. It's England. It's so inconsistent. But
I try to be careful how much I sent to you. I was like, yeah, he's not going to be happy. Let's not needle in too much right now.
No, I kind of got to Leeds, Connor. Actually, I don't know what happened. Maybe it's just because I had like a couple of beers, but I was getting. And I was just basically ranting at my mate next to me who just wasn't listening, and he's a soundboard, you know. So, but I don't know what it was. It was just it was shocking. And Phil Foden, you know, everyone keeps talking about him being a generational talent, remains on the bench again. Yeah. Henderson comes on. I mean, we were just saying off air, what does that say about Phillips? You know, apparently he's fully fit in this tournament as well. So, but it just seemed very scripted, and the States.
I understand the Henderson sub.
It was intensity, isn't it? He wanted
it's intensity, and you're losing the midfield battle, right?
Yeah.
So I think what Southgate did, and I'm not alone in saying this, is said, okay, this doesn't look like it's going to be our day. We just need to not mess this up and lose.
I think so, yeah.
And I don't think Phil Foden as a sub is a great idea. I think starting with Phil Foden is a better idea. Do you bring him on in a match where America feels a bit handy and think that they can nab a result? I don't think so. You know, I think
I thought when he brought them on as when he brought Foden and Grealish on as a combo against Iran, that was really effective. But the problem is, I thought during the game when he brought Grealish on, I mean, it just seemed like there was, as soon as Grealish got the ball, there was 4 Americans just all around him, including Tyler Adams, and it was just like, I mean, what are you expecting him to do here? You almost need a threat on either side, or a threat in Grealish and someone else through the middle. To
in really what world is Jack Grealish the guy you bring on instead of Phil Foden, though?
Yeah. I mean,
it's just
a duo
would have
nonsense. A duo would have been nice, I think. Right. And even like Wilson. I mean, Callum Wilson, I was saying in the pub, it'd have been good if he'd have maybe brought Mason Mount off and then gone 2 up top. But that just seems too tactically flexible for Southgate. It seems like you have to just stick with this formation every single time. And it's, like for like. And yeah, it was massively frustrating. But I guess like what you just said, it was England was shocking. It's one of the worst I've seen us play. We were just dominated. So I just thought at least they got out there with a point. And I was saying to you as well on text, I mean, they're still top of the group. So
yeah. And, I've made a couple mentions of English arrogance, and I want to quantify what I mean in what we actually saw on the pitch. Because it's one thing to make this abstract claim, right? It's another thing to come back with, here's evidence of arrogance. So when the States had the ball, right, in the midfield, they never put the onus on Adams, Musa, and McKennie to just be able to play through the English players. No. They said, okay, we're going to pinch Weah in, Pulisic in. We're going to try to create some quick interchanges and then try to get out wide, which is what they did, right? And I think they did a really good job of that. But you do that by sort of conceding, we're not just going to be able to play man v man through these guys. They're too good. Versus England, no matter what the States did, they rolled out the Mike Bassett 4-4-2. They essentially just put their 2 forwards right in front of Declan Rice and said, all right, what are you going to do now? And Maguire and Stones were playing these kind of slow balls out to the flanks where the Americans would just press them and force this. What would have made sense is a tactical adjustment saying, okay, we're going to pinch some players in and flood the midfield and then create some space out wide, right? But they didn't do it. They sort of just, it seems like, I'm not sure if it was, maybe the players are given latitude and they chose not to, or maybe Southgate just didn't think this was the right way to play. But it's almost like they said, well, we've got an 100 million pound player out there, another 80 million pound player out there, and an eventual 150 million pound player out there. They should be able to beat these guys 1v1. And that's what I mean. Like, you have to, if it's not working, you can't just look at them and like, well, they're better. They'll figure it out. Making a tactical adjustment for me would have been like a concession. Okay, America's winning the midfield battle right now. We need to do something different and send in some reinforcements tactically the way we're playing and catch them out, because they could have done. They didn't. I mean, it's not like if you create a war and a saturation war in the midfield, the States are going to have the back line to be able to handle runner through the channels. I'm sure England would have loved to have seen Harry Kane isolated on 1v1 against Walker Zimmerman. Probably would have loved it. Didn't happen, right? And at some point, maybe just play some long ball against the States, like Wales did, and see what happens. They didn't want to do it. They were hung up on playing a certain way. They thought they should win those battles. And Tyler Adams once again proved people continue to underestimate him, including me. I mean, I thought a 17 or whatever 20 million pounds. I can't do the currency conversions in my head. I thought that was a fair value for Tyler Adams. He's starting to look like the best transfer of the summer, maybe in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I've said to you multiple times, I wanted a more full profile when it came to who I wanted through Leeds, through the doors in the summer and stuff like that. But he's absolutely like for what his actual profile is, which we don't need a full profile because you've got Mark Rocker to compensate him. Yeah. You've literally got a player there who is evolving, and I'm now looking at him and I'm thinking he's got 2 man of the match performances. He's been completely dominant in midfield against a strong English midfield.
Good midfielders. Yeah.
The Welsh midfield isn't bad at all either, and he dominated that midfield. And you're looking at him now and thinking, and he's on a 5-year contract, whatever it is at Leeds, 4-5-year contract. And, we're going to actually do well to keep hold of this guy again in the summer, because there's going to be suitors for him, because what he's doing at the minute is, and it's almost like I feel almost with the style at Leeds at the minute and how frantic and how chaotic it is, that in comparison to what it is with the States, where it seemed a little bit more measured. I'm not saying you're the best team, but it seems a little bit more measured and structured. It's almost like you're doing him a little bit of a disservice, because I think in maybe a more organized, structured team, I'm not pimping him out here. I'm just saying it'd be nice if Leeds were able to just have that element to our game at points and have a really good, in-game management side to us. He'd really flourish. And yeah, it just seems like the chaos doesn't really suit his game. And you're seeing that with the States.
It's hard to say, right? Because he certainly has more in the locker than the Leeds system has him playing.
Yeah.
That said, if you're going to play a system, he's going to be I think the best available option to play in that style. So it's sort of like a trade-off. And I think if Leeds had more depth at the center midfield position, you'd probably see more things out of Tyler Adams. That said, I think that what's happened with Pulisic at Chelsea might actually help Leeds. Because if you're going to sign for a big club, like there's rumors that Man United want Tyler Adams, right? He's not taking Casemiro's spot. I love Tyler Adams. I think Casemiro's a better player. He's won the Champions League 4 times. I think Tyler Adams is going to look at what's happened with Pulisic and say, well, do I really want to play 1 in 3 matches? Tyler Adams wants to play every single minute of every single match. And I think if Leeds can prove with the 49ers or whatever the case is, that they're going to invest enough to improve the squad up to mid-table and give Leeds a fighting chance for maybe one of the Europa League spots, I think there's a real opportunity we could keep Tyler Adams, because Adams he seems to be in love with the club. He is Leeds in terms of the way he plays. He could be a club legend here. The club have to show that they're ambitious to keep him, but I don't think that he's going to look at what's happened with. And just what happens at the top of world football. I mean, look at how good Hakim Ziyech looked today. He can't get a game for Chelsea because you have not necessarily all world class, but you have world class and top shelf players at every position, 2 or 3 deep. It's difficult to get in those teams, and I don't know. Maybe you test yourself that way, but he's played Champions League. Would he want to go back to a team at Salzburg's, at Leipzig's level, or would he like to try to do more with Leeds United? I think he's the kind of character that would, if things go right for the club, want to stay at Leeds United long term. So there's a real opportunity there to keep him.
I think that was the whole thing with Rafinha, wasn't it? It was the fact that it almost got to a point where, we're talking about him signing a new contract. We're talking about him potentially staying on. He seemed to be full throttle. Deco was positive noises coming out of there, his camp and all this sort of stuff. But then January came and went, and obviously Leeds didn't do anything. And it's definitely got to come into a player's psyche. Players got to be thinking, well, there's not really any ambition here. It's going to be a relegation battle. It's going to be another relegation battle next season. So, I need to, and obviously Barca, when they came in, it was obviously going to be a thing. But Barca were in allegedly for around about 12 months. They were looking at him. And he didn't really seem to accelerate until after January. So it must play into a player's psyche. It must do.
That said, though, Connor, Rafinha seems to be a pretty high character guy, right? And so, what are you going to do? Start talking about how you've always dreamed of going to Barcelona, in November? No, you're not going to do that, right? Unless you're a real self-centered player. I think Rafinha is the kind of guy he buys in where he's at. I think this is not to say that Americans don't dream of playing for particular clubs, but it's not quite the same as, a Brazilian player, an English player. Yeah, exactly. So I think that some of them, they have historical ties to these clubs. Like Rafinha
Brazilian playing for Barca as well.
Right. He will have watched Ronaldinho, he'll have watched these players and said, I want to be that guy. Pulisic is the only, I think the media sometimes misinterprets what we think of Pulisic. We don't think that he's this world-class player that is, at the top of the world football game. I think he's the first American to get significant time at a club like Chelsea and score in a Champions League semifinal and play a major role in the final and win a Champions League as a significant piece of the puzzle. I mean, the way he looked at during Project Restart under Lampard was excellent, right? We've not had that before. So that's going to cause some like young American kids to think, well, maybe I could play for Chelsea someday, right? And that's the significance. I think it's hard for especially English folks to understand because they've always had players at these big clubs. Americans, we've not, right? So, does Tyler Adams have a lifelong ambition to play at one of these particular clubs? I don't know. I think that, he has a real opportunity to cement himself long-term in the kind of annals of Leeds United history, but Leeds have to show themselves to be at least moderately ambitious in order to.
I agree, mate. I agree, especially with what he's doing right now. Especially with what I mean, it's he's talking about squads and mentality and psyche, and I wonder, when Brendan Aronson's looking at Tyler at the minute, and what he's doing, and how excellent he's been. I understand that there's not really a position for him at the minute in the state squad, but you do spare a thought for Brendan Aronson, don't you? And he seems like such a lovely lad. He'd just be happy with for anyone, and he's supportive of everyone in the state side. But seeing his fellow Leeds United teammate just light up the World Cup at the minute, I wonder what he's thinking.
Well, I do think there's a play. I would love to see Berhalter play Tim Weah up front. I think he's probably the best option we have at the number 9 position, but Berhalter won't do it. And then you could see Brendan Aronson play wide right, especially given the alleged fallout between Gio Reyna, and I keep saying Gio Reyna and Greg Berhalter. But I think that, again, we've talked about this last video, right? There's this sort of perception because these guys are upbeat and positive that they're not like, you better believe Brendan Aronson's like, he would love to be in these matches.
Yeah.
And apparently, so I read I'm not sure if it was a Phil Hay article, but apparently Aronson and Tyler Adams chirp at each other during training all day long and like really get stuck into one another. And Tyler Adams apparently loves to run his mouth during training.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
It's amazing. I love players like that. There was an ex-American international named Sasha Kleshins doing Fox Sport coverage during the World Cup, and he said that when Tyler Adams was 16, he came into the team at New York Red Bull. It was chirping him. He was just like, "Who is this kid? Like, shut up!"
Jesus.
So yeah, I think that the Medford Messi is definitely super competitive. Wants to get in the side. I think that the American team tends to have a good squad dynamic, and players playing particular roles, and obviously being very supportive. But yeah, I imagine it's got to be hard. Tyler Adams has been, I think he's second in the World Cup in terms of total tackles, I think, right now. I mean, he's just been a monster. And it's not like loads of players come up and kind of surprise in the World Cup and then fizzle out of the clubs. For me, with the exception of maybe the first match in the Premier League, Tyler Adams has been like a 7 or better out of 10 in every match he's played in. So I think he's showing us that. I mean, I have a question for you though. So if you're a director of football at a club, mid-table club in England, or maybe even an elite club, and you're looking at that performance, and you're looking at the performances over the last season for their clubs, do you take Declan Rice or do you take Tyler Adams?
You're hammering on this Declan Rice.
I am. I want to be clear. I don't have an anti-Declan Rice agenda. I think he's a very good player, but I can't imagine that inflation is that poor in the UK that the English tax has to be 60, 70 million pounds. I look at Declan Rice, I see like a 40, 50 million pound player.
Well, I guess the relevant one is Phillips, isn't it? If you're looking at Calvin
would you take Calvin Phillips over Tyler Adams right now?
No chance.
Me neither.
Absolutely no chance. And I understand there's Calvin was in a completely different system where he was insane, and we were probably there was literally Leeds fans saying he was worth 100 million when he was playing this. I mean, I was never anywhere near believing Calvin Phillips was that worth. I'd have said probably 55 tops, and that'd have been top stretching.
There are going to be people that think we're slagging off Phillips by saying this, but the reality is that like defensive midfielders don't go for huge money,
and his injury record and his age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So like, by saying that Calvin Phillips is a 50 million instead of 100 million, he's a very good player. He's an excellent player. Yeah. But when I look at a guy like Tyler Adams, who is sort of being treated as an aberration, as maybe it's a guy performing above his level, and I look at just the way Declan Rice has played for West Ham this season, at the end of last, and in the England team, I mean, you're going to pay 100 million pounds for a player that disappears against the United States?
Yeah, there's a lot of English tax, though, isn't there? There's a lot of it.
Why?
It goes. I don't know. Probably because they're just playing the Premier League, and they've always, they've maybe hopped around the youth systems at West Ham and Arsenal and Chelsea, and I don't know.
It's
They've built
big
up.
money. This, like,
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about valuing a player who I don't think is better as being 5 times more valuable in the transfer market, who's an
Yeah.
older player. It just boggles my mind. We won't see Tyler Adams to Chelsea link. It's not going to happen, right? We're not going to see it. I don't know. Maybe I have an inferiority complex and I'm just coming up and I'm just angry about it. But like, I don't know.
Well, I've said to you before, haven't I? I think with defensive midfielders, there's different profiles as well.
Yeah.
Calvin's completely different to Tyler Adams. Tyler Adams is completely different to Declan Rice. And I think there are advantages and disadvantages of each and every one of those defensive midfielders. I don't think, finding a defensive midfielder really who has the same profile as another one in the Premier League, I think it's quite rare. But that's why I find it quite difficult to compare. But at the same time, when you do look at someone like Declan Rice, 100 million is nuts. It is nuts. But I don't even, to be honest, Gabe, I think we'll be looking back in 2 or 3 years' time and 100 million will be the new 60 million. I think that's just how football's going to start.
You're probably right. I mean, I looked at the transfer records and, the fact that Jack Grealish, who has 4 goals in his last 2 seasons for Man City, I know the season's, it's still a relatively young season this year, but 1 goal this season, and he went for more money than Eden Hazard did to Real Madrid. It kind of boggles my mind a little bit. But I don't want to just be on one all day about the overvaluation of English players. But I think that's my last kind of point about that particular match, is that I think that there is a world that exists where you can say that England played poorly, the United States played well, and maybe England aren't as good as they think they are. And I think that all 3 things are true. I think that you would expect for those players, they would play better. They wouldn't lose the midfield battle so lopsidedly. I mean, like a 5'7", 5'8" Tyler Adams just bossing around these England midfielders was, again, not really my bingo card. And I love Tyler Adams. I just didn't expect it to be that thorough. And maybe we take a step back and say, okay, like this isn't fantasy football. Like, we're not just going to be able to plug in names and get a point total and win the match. You know what I mean? It just, I don't know. I think there's a strange sentimentality that goes around the England side. And I think they have to look at this match and say, if a team decides to just wait in the mid block and put 2 forwards in front of our center halves, we may have a problem playing against good teams, because there are going to be better teams that have a good number 9 and have other players that can be more of an attacking threat, and center halves that aren't. Tim Ream has played really well, but I mean, tell me 36-year-old Tim Ream should be able to,
I think as well, like you look at, and I know it's tournament football and it all goes out the window and all this sort of stuff. But you look at the 6 games that we played prior to the World Cup. I mean, we got absolutely spanked by Hungary, 4-0 at home. We lost to Italy. We undeservedly came back into the game against Germany at Wembley. So it's not been a great campaign for him. So, I mean, they need to, that USA result maybe sort of aligns itself a little bit more with the true form of this England side in the last sort of 10 games, whereas that Iran performance was a little bit of an anomaly. It was quite surprising, to be honest with you. So it's going to be fascinating to see what they do against Wales. For me, it'll just be a grind, and they might get it over the line in terms of a 1-0 or a 2-1.
I think Wales are really poor.
They are bad, but Gabe against the English, and I guess you could probably say this for the States as well. Against the English, it sounds arrogant to say it, but it's like, oh, we're up against England here. We really want to beat England. We have that effect with so many sides.
No, absolutely. Look, England are the condescending older brother to the Americans when it comes to football, right? So, and they're still bigger and they're still stronger, right? So it's like, rightfully so. It's just hard for me to look at how poor Wales have been. I mean, everyone's they gave Gareth Bale man of the match against the United States after scoring a penalty. He was,
I couldn't believe that.
And it's really only happened because of a woeful. I mean, any center half who's ever played knows that you don't go to ground when a forward has his back to you in the box. Like, why? Going through him, I just gave up a stupid penalty. Anyway, maybe you're right. I don't think the Wales team has it in them. And it's not because they have players in the championship or lower leagues or whatever. It's just they don't look particularly good.
No,
This isn't the Euro campaign under
they
Chris
look a lot.
Coleman.
I mean, they look a lot weaker, don't they? From I mean, this Wales team is based on passion and fight and all, and which is great because obviously they've not got the ream of talent that other nations have, and I think it's quite poignant to look at the amount of people who are in Wales as well, and the pool they've got to choose from, which is literally about 1.4 million people. So they are a punching above the weight dramatically.
Why do we always talk about population though? I mean, how many people are in Croatia?
It's a great point.
Yeah,
not a lot.
Like that's the thing. Like China, massive country. I'm not necessarily worried about their footballing team. Same thing with India.
Well, the big one's Uruguay, isn't it? Uruguay's production of talent with the size of the country is quite staggering. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think we've got to give them a little bit of credit. And it's once again, Gabe, it's not even the number one sport over there. Probably similar to the States. It's not. So I mean, you got to give them credit for getting to the World Cup.
It's not in Wales. What's the number one? Is it rugby?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, so. I think, I mean, I think we'll get the job done, to be honest with you. And it's going to be, I don't know. I think you'll do it. I think it's going to be us and you in the next stages, to be honest. So,
I mean, so here's my fear. My fear is that the States are going to have 65% of the possession against a side like Iran. Yeah. They're not going to be able to get a goal. And we're going to get the 74th, 75th minute. We're going to be, we're going to be so frustrated. And then we're going to have slow, static center halves like Walker Zimmerman. Caught on the counter. And I mean, there were a couple times against England where, as good as Robinson looked going forward at times, he really left us exposed at the back. And if we don't have Tyler Adams, like England are through. Tyler Adams made this one. I keep saying world class, but it was a world class tackle on Bukayo Saka.
You can make a world class tackle.
Yeah, you can, right? Right in the box on Bukayo Saka, which, I mean, got to have the timing exactly right. Saka's one of the most dangerous players in world football right now. He's the most dangerous people out there. Man.
But Gabe, even in the big games against these elite players this season, Adams has just been immense. It's not just for England, it's been for Leeds. He's been absolutely immense in that midfield. So you feel like he's just in the changing room giving himself a pep talk beforehand and really cheering himself up.
The wall. What would it take? Yeah. What would it take for Tyler Adams to be classified? I'm not saying he should, just for everyone out there who's about to jump in the comments. I'm not yet. But what do you think it would take for people to look at Tyler Adams and say, we think he's a world-class disruptive center midfielder?
I like how you put disruptive in there.
You like that, huh? Little modifier in there. But no, honestly, I mean, like, what would it take? And he's better on the ball than people think. His pass completion percentage is relatively high for a guy who's just classified as just a ball winner.
He's better on the ball. He's much better on the ball than I thought he was.
Yeah,
I thought he was.
Me too. I got to tell you. I mean, me too.
Yeah.
I understand now why Nagelsmann really rated him, and I think he was a casualty of the Marsch regime. So Marsch comes in to Leipzig, makes Tyler Adams like his guy. I think some of the older players resented it a little bit. They clearly weren't bought into Marsch ball. Marsch goes out. The next manager comes in. You have to wonder if maybe he looked at the other players and said, you know what?
Yeah.
Like, because everyone was looking at, well, Tyler Adams was kind of in and out of the squad. There's more than performance that goes in to how someone's sort of rolled out and rated. And for me, like, Nagelsmann's a really good manager. He's rated Tyler Adams incredibly high. And maybe we've just profiled him wrong. And I'm going to hold my hand up. I thought at his best.
Well, Gabe, you can't do that on YouTube. You can't hold your hands up. You're just that's your opinion forever, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. I'm as static as the American
you moron.
Center halves. Yeah, I just can't move. Cannot be moved. Have to be exact same opinion. But no, I mean, honestly, I think the more I look at it, I mean, again, just about half a season gone, right? Yeah. So plenty of time. We've seen plenty of players who light the Premiership on fire, which I'm not saying Adams has done that, and then sort of fizzle out.
How old is he? Is he 23?
23. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's I mean, what a bit defensive midfield as well. You're probably looking at your prime in and around late 20s easy because I mean, it's not like you're not putting out the numbers, but I think as a striker and maybe a forward, you have your peak a little bit earlier. I think defensive midfielders are almost able, because they're just screening the back four, to be able to have their peak a little bit later. Remember that with Claude Makelele, he just had his peak at around about 28, 29. But yeah, world class. I don't know how you quantify a disruptive defensive midfielder as world class. I don't really know, to be honest, mate. It's a good question.
I think at the apex,
get it in the comment section below.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. I think at the apex of his achievement, I think that Tyler Adams could be a Michael Essien type of player.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay.
We laughed there. Why'd we laugh?
Yeah, I mean, he's got to add a few goals to his game. But
that's true. Yeah, he's never going to get. That's right. Essien was more of a true box to box, wasn't he? But I just think of the way Essien would get stuck in a tackle and just freak the other team out.
It's monster Essien.
Yeah.
So good.
All right, so maybe it's a bad comparison.
It's tough though, isn't it? It's tough.
It's hard. Yeah,
it's tough finding a defensive midfielder who almost mirrors Tyler Adams' attributes, because he's almost old school. I think he's old school. He's not a modern defensive midfielder, because you've got a bit, probably similar to how we'd speak when it came to Calvin Phillips. It's distributing, it's carrying the ball. I feel a defensive midfielder now is almost another attacking body as well. It's somebody who just marauds forward.
Very rare to see a player who's like a traditional in the hole midfielder now.
Yeah,
I'm so desperate for validation for some of these American players. I so badly want to hear Roy Keane comment on Tyler Adams. I'm like, come on, Roy, say something positive about Tyler Adams. He hasn't done it. Right? He did.
We all are, mate. We all want it. Like, I wanted it. I was sat there. It was really funny because we were in this place in Manchester, and there must have been about 10,000 people there. And there was commentary afterwards. And I was just like to everyone around me, shh. It's like you're in a bar with 10,000 people. It's not gonna quiet down. But then it's the old thing, isn't it? It's the players who aren't well known. It's the players, and we get it with Leeds all the time, don't we? It's the players who aren't well known. It's not on the biggest clubs in the world. They haven't got the notoriety of a Declan Rice, of a Jude Bellingham, so they're not going to be spoken about as much. And I mean, the coverage over here with Neville and Keane, and I think it was Ian Wright or whoever it was just so England focused. There was no real American analysis.
Fair enough, right? That's what I would expect. Like over here in the States, it was like there were two types of coverage. There was the ESPN coverage, who, unless it was the ESPN FC, they weren't really that fussed about what the States did. But for the in-country programming in Doha is Fox, and they were.
Was that Stephen A. Smith? Was he on there?
Stephen A. Smith, yeah. I'll send you the clip. He wasn't impressed. He said
there was just a guy in front of him going nuts, and I didn't know who it was, but I recognized Stephen A. Smith just from boxing in the UFC.
Yeah, it's Mad Dog. Mad Dog.
I didn't know he spoke on football, to be honest. But there you go.
He calls it that soccer. He's like, I love that soccer. No, Stephen A. Smith. I think he said I don't care unless you win, right? So I think that's going to be the majority of press coverage here. But the ex-players who are doing media coverage now, were obviously, I mean, you'd think that we won the American Revolution again with his 0-0 draw, and everybody's going to point out, well, the States are one win and 2 draws against England at World Cup, so we've got their number. Just nonsense. But
something there though. There is something we can't seem to beat you at competitions. I don't know what it is.
I think England just struggle against inferior sides on paper who play an organized style and aren't afraid of them.
But then it's like at Wembley when we beat you 3-0, we made it look so easy, and it's like, well,
it's a friendly.
Well, that's exactly that's it. I mean,
we beat Uruguay and Italy in friendlies, and I would never say that. I'm not saying, okay, I mean, clearly, right, it's not the same thing. England are a better side. I think that, last thing about the Tyler Adams thing, I think that as long as I moved to Leeds in 2009, and I've been closely connected to my friends in England for a long time, I've never had one player where I could say I would put them in the England side right now. And I'm not saying that Tyler Adams is better than those guys. I would say, based on form right now, if Tyler Adams was English, I would probably start him over Declan Rice. That's what I'd say. And he's the only guy I've ever been able to say that with. Because if I'm honest, and I try to be an honest guy when it comes to this stuff, I'm never going to say that Pulisic belongs in the team over, Phil Foden or
no. Okay,
obviously not.
Gabe, we might have to move you off the stream if you'd have said something as silly as that.
Yeah, no. I would take myself off a stream and throw myself into a quarry. It'd be ridiculous. I love Christian Pulisic and I love these American players, but we got to be realistic, don't we? Tyler Adams is starting to make me believe that we could have a player that could get in terms of that defined role, doing that thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've gone on about it for like 10 minutes.
No, I think discussing Tyler Adams for 10 minutes is a good thing. But I think there is someone who we need to speak about in terms of the result against France. It was Rasmus Christensen. I don't know if you managed to watch it, mate. But
I watched some, yeah.
Yeah, not. I mean, obviously the last goal went in, and I was looking at him, to be honest. And we've seen that maybe a little bit with Rasmus. People in the comment section might think that's a bit harsh, but maybe just at some points losing his man, especially obviously when the attacking team's coming forward. I thought it's that awareness again where Mbappe is just coming around the back post. He has a quick glance at him, sees he's there, and then still Mbappe. I mean, Mbappe is a magnificent footballer, but it just seemed maybe it was his fault for that second one. I don't know how you saw it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm, as a ex-defender at a much lower level, I'm a bit sympathetic, right? Because like attacking players can get 6 chances, and as long as they score on one of them, it's all right.
Yeah.
For the defender, you have to be dialed in for all 90 minutes and then stoppage time. And if you slip up one time, like, so the way you're rated is a little bit different. And I gotta be honest, like, there's not a player in the world that if Kylian Mbappe is coming off the shoulder, I would expect them to, get it right all the time.
Yeah.
And that's like one player I really rate, and it's really unfortunate he's not in the England team because he's hurt, is Reece James, right?
Yeah.
In a individual battle with Kylian Mbappe, I would still say that if you give me microcosms of the match of 10 encounters, I would say that Mbappe is going to get the better out of him a couple times, right? So it's hard to say with Rasmus. For me, it's, as a Leeds fan, it's he's being asked to do different things, right? He's getting a little bit further forward. They're playing with the back three.
Yeah.
So not a lot of correlation for me, but you're right. I mean, yeah, for me, Rasmus Christensen is a very good player who I'm not going to expect to boss Kylian Mbappe or be dialed in for 90 minutes.
He looks much better in the 3 though. 3 and
yeah,
then
he does.
Push up as a wing back. He looks much better, much more confident, and much more effective going forward.
Yeah, I think I do wonder.
Can I just say as a caveat as well, there are much better players around him. So
yeah, I think what I was going to say here, what I was trying to form in my brain, was that I think that there's a real concern for Leeds that if he takes a risk and loses the ball, that I'm not trying to bag on our center halves again, but I think that we know there's errors in them, right? So if you lose a ball in possession and a team comes on a quick counter, I mean, we've been strung out a couple of different times, and you can only count on Elan Melier to bail the team out so many times. I think that that's probably in the back of his mind. And I know that Marsh wants him to play bravely, but you have to play responsibly. And I think sometimes he struggles with that balance in Leeds, as anybody would. But
I mean, who are the centre backs? It's Anderson, who I do really rate at Crystal Palace. I think there's one called Nielsen or Nelson. I can't remember what he's called. And Kier's not even in there anymore. He was in there. He's a bench option. Oh, it's Christensen, isn't it? Andreas Christensen. So yeah, I mean, it's good centre backs there. Yeah. As you say, there's an extra centre back there if Rasmus was to screw up a little bit. But yeah,
yeah, they have plenty of cover. They've got, and this isn't a slight on Leeds players, but like, they have some really, really top players in that side. So, the margin for error is a bit higher. That said, I mean, if you'd expect France to win that game.
Have any players so far, obviously the January transfer window coming up, and us sort of maybe understanding a little bit more that the 49ers deal is going to come through a little bit sooner than we thought. Have you looked at any players, and this is just putting you completely on the spot, by the way, and thought to yourself, obviously, realistically, it would be nice for Leeds to maybe make a little bit of a bid for that player? And I mean, I was looking at Itakura, mentioned it on the Patreon account, who looks absolutely fabulous for Japan. It looks very, very good. Obviously, we've been speaking about Musa, who would be what an acquisition he would be, but I think he's going to be going on to higher things, to be honest with you. Are there any that sort of stood out for you?
Cheating off your work. I think what you've said is right. I think the Japanese are a team that, again, have better players than people think. And some of these players, I think, if given an opportunity,
Kamada as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think but to be honest, Connor, like, the World Cup boosts valuation.
Of course it does, yeah.
Unless, like, we have to think about who might be going out, right? So hopefully we can get buyer for Matthias Klick.
Yep.
I don't know who, and I don't know what we'd get, but you would hope we would get some money
Maybe,
back there.
yeah, maybe it could. I think you could still get a 2 or 3 million for him.
Yeah,
So
2 or
you
3.
you
But in
still
order to
get,
cobble together, like, anybody playing well in the World Cup is gonna go for over 10 million unless
yep.
they're older, and I don't imagine Leeds doesn't seem that invested in kind of pushing 30 plus players. So there wasn't really a lot that stood out to me in terms of this is a realistic get.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, some people in the comments of our last video were asking me to like chime in on American players. I like to see us sign. I don't want to see us sign American players as a policy. I think the one thing I like about the American players is the mentality, and I think that's something you see in Brendan and you see in Tyler.
Yeah.
And I think it's something you see on the opposite end in a player like Luke Ayling, who I think expects us to get scored against, right? So, but I mean, honestly, like as you mentioned, Musa is going to be out of our financial purview, and I don't necessarily think that a guy like Musa is not going to come in to back up Mark Rocca.
No,
He's just
no
not going to
chance.
do it, right?
No chance.
So, realistically, I think that less than snapping up players who are showing up well in the World Cup, I want us to snap up players who are maybe discontent at their current clubs and want a move. I'm going to continue to say Adams from Southampton. I would love to see him on our side. If anything, just to provide a different look, because I think Bamford's done.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't think we'll see him back, and if we do, I know we talked about the pathway for Joffe. I don't think it's there. So I think you have to invest in a second striker who's going to push for time and really keep, because if Rodrigo knows that he's the guy and nobody's coming in behind him, I expect his form to dip. So
Yeah.
I think he needs to always be on the precipice of losing his place, and then we'll get the best out of him. We desperately need a left back. There's been nobody really in the tournament that I think we can afford. I would much rather see us pick up somebody who's Premier League proven, who's going to get stuck in and who's going to give us an option going forward.
I guess there's Guerrero at Portugal, isn't there, that we've been apparently interested in?
Yeah, but I mean, do you think he'll come in for the kind of money we're going to be able to spend in January? I don't.
No,
I mean,
no chance.
No.
I mean, he's still in his prime. He's 28 years of age.
Yeah,
He's obviously, obviously Dortmund are clearly looking to get rid of him, but he's playing for Portugal. He's playing 90 minutes for Portugal, so he's clearly there's going to be clubs in for him if he's going.
Dortmund are a feeder club for top 4 teams in every league, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that Leeds United are a big profile club, legendary club, but like so are Nottingham Forest, right? So I mean,
but it's like you're right, man. It's realism, isn't it, for this January window? It's like
about money.
I mean, we've seen it already. The Charles de Ketelaere stuff, and it's like obviously he's not started well at AC Milan, which I find baffling if they are actually to get. I mean, that would just be staggering.
I think that's all noise. I don't think that he's going anywhere. It would kill a young player's confidence.
It'd be so short-sighted as well for AC Milan. It's like, for the player that you've bought and the investment you put into him and the time it took to get it over the line, what, you're just going to write him off after 17 games? Ridiculous. Like, so I can't say that, but something like that, obviously. Somehow I don't think Cody Gakpo is going to be on the cards, but no,
I don't want to see one more link to Cody Gakpo.
No,
it's the highest XG in this tournament. Like,
well, it's just boring. I mean, now Rodrigo de Paul's had a bad game. We'll be linked to him as well. So I think it's just one of those things where there has to be, and I've said this on numerous videos, an option A, B, and C for this window. It can't just be Leeds going for one player for 30 days who's unattainable. It has to be realism. like you just said, like people might disagree, but Shea Adams, has been a lot of chat, and I've mentioned it as well, like Ollie McBurney, and people start laughing at players like that because they seem to think that Leeds are up here when we are not. We are down here at the minute. So, players who can get goals and contribute to our style of play is what I'm looking at. And I'm just hoping, and this is obviously on a tangent, but, it naturally it feeds into the Leeds talk, doesn't it? That we've actually got options that we have ready to go. Ready to go.
We are ready to do a job. Like, and that's the thing. Like, so when you grow and scale out a tech company, and this is an analogy that actually works.
Nice. I want to hear this. I want to hear it.
The first 0 to 50 employees are hired to do a job, right? But as you grow and scale, you need people with a different kind of experience that are going to come in and take your company to the next level. And a lot of people don't survive that next stage. It's a little bit cutthroat, but that's how these companies grow. Odd timing, because there are a lot of layoffs happening in tech. But the point is, Connor, when you're at this stage, when you're in a relegation battle, you are not going to get players that are being targeted by Chelsea, Man City, Man United, they're not going to come to Leeds unless they're untested young players. And I think that one thing that's happening in world football that I find disturbing is we're taking 19, 20-year-olds, throwing them in top clubs and top or competitive games in top leagues, expecting them to figure it out. And you can completely ruin a player if you do that. You totally shatter their confidence at a time where they don't have, the body of work to know how good they are.
I think Pulisic is a good example, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's 100% right. I think he'll be okay, but I think that he'll probably find his level at like a Newcastle or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be good for him. Where this fits in with the Leeds team is I see a lot of calls to give the young players more time in vital matches in a relegation scrap. That's not the time to develop a player, because if they screw up, they're going to have Ellen Road on their backs at 19 years old, knowing that messing up making a crucial error could cost you in a relegation battle.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not good for young players. So lots of calls to bring Perkins in to try to take one of the spots, Giabi to come in. I don't think it's appropriate. We have to invest in players that are going to be good for a season or two to get us over the hump. Players who have been in relegation battles before, and wait for this new ownership to prove that they're willing to invest. Otherwise, we're going to be a low table relegation scrap team every year. We just look up and down the Premiership. The teams that spend the most money get the best players and finish higher the table. It's very simple. We're not going to be able to bring in players on our budget who are these kind of starry-eyed signings. It's just not going to happen. So realistically, we need to find players who have done a good job playing dice ball and can come in and do a job for us in a particular position to get us to the next stage of growth, if that even happens.
Yeah. And then, you do get to that stage where you invest and you bring better players in, and then the fans' expectations rise a little bit. And then we start to see a little bit of progress as well. But I think it's been nullified that much in terms of options because we've been so dire and negligent in transfer windows that fans turn to the youth as almost a prerequisite. It's like, oh yeah, well, we must turn to the youth because, even just like a Crystal Palace or a Southampton or teams like that who have invested in squad depth, and I'm not saying they're the best, but they have invested in squad depth over the years. Leeds haven't done that. Leeds haven't done that at all. We haven't evolved. We haven't regenerated. So if you're at that point, the fans' expectations are naturally going to be, let's turn to it. And we've got a CEO who constantly talks about a pathway and constantly talks about not wanting to block the youth and all this sort of stuff. So the narrative is all down that route, which is, the route to youth, which is it's a very clever PR ploy. Of course,
we have to ignore the narrative at this point. Honestly, I think that the last thing we should be looking at, which is sort of strange to say in terms of the club direction, is what comes out of that PR machine. No. I think that we need to look at, and I think there's going to be a temptation to want to look into this tournament and see a couple players who have a couple of really good matches, right? So I think that there will be people in the comments, I'm thinking, saying, well, why don't you go in for McKennie, right? He'd be affordable. Well, because McKennie is inconsistent for Juventus. And he's been really good, and then he's been really poor. He's been really good for the States at times, like against England. He's been really poor against Wales. When you're in a scrap like ours, and you're not going to have a ton of money to invest, you need to look at a body of work over a period of time, not a 1, 2, 3 performance player profile. And that's why you don't go with young players either. Like, you don't look at one piece of skill that Jaffe pulls off against Brighton and say he belongs starting against Man City. That's unfair to the player. And it's unrealistic. So I want to see us buy maybe some not necessarily glamorous buys, people who have been, I keep saying people instead of players. I mean, the players are people. It's bizarre. Who have been tested in the Premier League, who are going to do a job for us, and we know what we're going to get, and it's going to be reliable, dependable. I would like to see us invest in a good center half. Like,
be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and you can just see one of the teams I know really well is mid 2000s Fulham, right? They went from being a relegation.
Why?
Yeah, I wonder why. It's true. It's true. I've been found out. But they went from being a relegation threatened team to a team challenging for the Europa League, and they did it because they bought Breda Hangelen and Aaron Hughes, who two very good, not glamorous, but very solid center halves. who gave them 4 or 5 years of good football.
Yeah.
And then you can invest in other areas. But you have to get the core, the foundation, the rock of this group. If Leeds had a better center half troop, they'd be in a better position on the table. That's just
100%.
facts,
Built from the back, don't you? Built
so
from the back.
I would rather see those kind of signings than the next up and coming name in world football as a striker or as a winger. It's not going to make a difference. If we're not solid at the back, we're not going to win matches. How it is.
No, you're right, mate. Furthermore, do you want to talk about Dan James, or is there any point?
Oh, I just feel bad for Dan James now.
Yeah,
I was kind of slagging him off as a joke last video, and now I feel bad about it. I mean, why does he keep getting rolled out there as a forward?
Yeah, I know.
It's like he's playing out of position for Leeds. He goes to Fulham so he can get game time in a position he wants to play. Yeah. They play him out of position if they play him at all. And then now Wales is playing him out of position. Like, this poor guy.
I know, and he's made his first appearance against the US. He's now made Kiefer Moore look world class.
Oh,
so that the impact of Kiefer Moore is now being looked on as like the most, one of the best impactful substitutions and changes of the World Cup campaign. So
if Brownie was here, I would ask him if he would take Kiefer Moore, and we get a nice long pause.
Kiefer Moore, Kiefer Moore. I think 3 years ago he was playing in he was playing like the Northern Division or something like that, the 6th tier of English football. So his rise has been pretty crazy, to be honest. But Kiefer Moore. I mean, the chance he missed against Leeds to make it about 4-0 at the time, or 4-1, whatever it was. Somehow he missed.
That's the thing.
So
would you take Kiefer Moore or Chris Wood?
I'd go Kiefer Moore all day. Yeah, I'd go Kiefer Moore, definitely. But yeah, mate, we'll leave it there on Dan James. There's just not much to say, unfortunately. And
say anything else, just so we have we're not ending on it.
I don't think he'll be a Leeds player come the summer. Something tells me, but I'm just once again hoping that we actually get some money for him. But we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me, Gabe, and everybody in the comment section. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's been a little bit longer, but we've incorporated a little bit of transfer stuff in there as well, which I know people are all getting geared towards now, because the World Cup's going to be done in T-minus 2 weeks, and we're going to be straight back onto anxiety-ridden Leeds United. So thank you so much for joining us, guys. We'll be back next week, and we will see you in a bit. Cheers.